and how it is involved in the conflict today, something you write about extensively in the report. So give us your take on Nazism's role in the country today and how it has influence right now when it comes to the conflict with Russia.
I mean, it's a known fact that Ukraine's, national hero, Bandera, Ukraine is the motherland of ethnic cleansing. I mean, they were killing anybody, that was not Ukrainian, trying to create a country because they had none. And they became Nazis because Hitler promised if they joined them, he would create a country for them. And so this, propaganda, Ukraine never had a country. The same as the Kurds in Iraq, all right? Just, not much different, really. The difference is that Bandera was killing, Hungarians, Polish, Jews, but also Russians. So the CIA actually protected him, and no Ukrainian Nazi was ever put on trial, like the Germans were. Yet what they did was unbelievably far worse than what the Germans did. They would actually, all this is documented. They would cut the baby out of a womb of a Jewish mother and sew in a live cat. The stuff that they did was just unbelievable. Even the New York Times, published a picture of them executing a Jewish woman holding the hand of her child, and then they throw them into a death pit for the child to die because, we don't waste bullets on children, they're too valuable. So they bury them alive. It's just, unbelievable. And this is Ukraine. They have been so indoctrinated in schools, etc., that all the starving, they were Russians that did it. And we had, employees there in Kiev and in Donetsk. They would never even talk to each other. And you could not bring even a bottle of Russian vodka to dinner in Kiev. They would smash it over your head. It was absurd. We had a conference in Greece, and the one from Kiev refused to fly back the quickest way because the plane simply stopped in Moscow. So the ethnic hatred there is beyond what anybody wants to even entertain. And we started the war. So as soon as you read some newspaper, Russia invaded unprovoked. Really? It's all just propaganda. You had John McCain there in Maidan, overthrow your government, we're with you, etc. You had Victoria Nuland there. Even one of her voice, her telephone calls got leaked. Basically, F the EU, we're doing what we want. She picked handpicked the interim government, and it was the interim government, unelected, which started the whole civil war. They were told to go attack the Donbass. The report that I did, I was surprised. I was called in for a meeting for a briefing on Russia, and I went. I was like, boy, what's going on? Why are you calling me? And I was kind of shocked at the fact that they didn't even have a peace plan. And I was asked to write the peace plan. And I asked, I said, is this sanctioned, or is this something that's like anti-Trump or whatever? I said, no, it's sanctioned and you were approved to be called in. I mean, I know I had clearance anyhow, so I mean, I had that for a long time. But, I mean, I was even shown Russia, in good faith, handed over the KGB file on the JFK assassination. It was about that thick. And then they did say to me, you do realize what we're asking you to do is what they killed JFK for. You know, I said, yes, I know that. And I knew about that a long time ago. But so I guess I was called in mainly because I know some of these neocons and I'm on the other side of the table. I mean, the same thing with in finance, you know, I've got the same experience as the top bankers or whatever, so I would be called in to, you know, to go against them. So I guess it just, you know, has migrated now to geopolitics. So, you know, I explained very bluntly, and I put it into this report. You know, if you want actually to create peace, and I was asked to create a plan that I thought Putin would accept. And I said, that's easy. You know, he already said numerous times. When Zelensky first, you know, came to power, he said, the Minsk agreement is very important. You know, honor the Minsk agreement. And, of course, they didn't. You had Merkel even come out and I think Der Spiegel, I was shocked. She said, well, we signed the Minsk agreement, but we had no intention of honoring it. Just amazing, really. I mean, I never saw a politician in the 50 years I've been doing this admit that they signed a peace treaty and with no intention of honoring it. I mean, why would anybody else ever sit down at the table with you again? So then the problem was you have the number 2 there in the EU, Kalis, who bluntly came out when Trump was negotiating with Putin saying, well, we're not going to honor anything that he does because we're not at the table. So what I put together, I said, look, you cannot walk in there and say, here's the peace plan we have negotiated, because they're not going to accept it. And the EU is the problem, not Russia. So I said, what we have to do is walk in and say, it's okay. We're just saying you must honor the Minsk agreement, which you already signed, so you don't need to sit at the table. You know, and I suggested that if the EU refuses to sign it or to honor it, that the United States should withdraw from NATO. Secondly, Zelensky is running around telling everybody that Ukraine is going to be the panacea for the greatest investment in European history. You know, he's got his eyes on trillions of dollars coming in. And so I said, secondly, Trump should issue an executive order and basically no American company, directly or indirectly, should be allowed to invest 10 cents in Ukraine. Cut off his $1 trillion dream unless he honors the right of the Donbass to vote. I mean, let's get real here. Czechoslovakia broke up, Czech Republic, Slovakia, ethnic lines. Yugoslavia broke up. Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro, Armenia. Same thing. You had war until you separated according to ethnic lines. The Donbass are Russians. Crimea are Russians. 15% are Tartars from the old Mongol invasion of 1240. They're not Ukrainian. Okay? So, if Putin, left, what would they do? They were engaging in immediately killing Russians in Odessa in 2014. And the press is just so corrupt. I mean, you even had Lindsey Graham out there saying, this is the best money we ever spent to kill Russians. Now, if you said that about blacks, Muslims, Indians, whatever, they would be hauling you off in Britain and putting you in jail for 22 months, But killing Russians, that's okay. It's and Madeleine Albright, she was another one of these ruthless neocons. And even Colin Powell in his memoirs, she was always advocating war, the same nonsense. And in his memoirs even said, she said, we got all these weapons, we should be using them. And if you look at what I also pointed out here is that, all right, Madeleine Albright, you had Blinken, Secretary of State under Biden, Victoria Nuland, and Garland. All four claim their families were persecuted by Russians. All four are from that region. Isn't that a conflict of interest? What's the difference between that and being president and saying, well, I'm going to send the agricultural department down to my house to cut the grass? You can't, is this a personal vendetta? I was in Washington doing, got called in for when they were forming the G5 back in '85. And that's when Gorbachev came to power and Reagan wanted to go meet him. And the neocons at that point couldn't call him a communist. So they just said you can never trust a Russian. That's the surface. What really took place behind the scenes was they came damn close to waging a coup against Reagan. They went to Congress to overrule him, that he shouldn't be meeting with Reagan, with Gorbachev. There was, an arms treaty. We shouldn't be doing that. We don't give up anything. We need every weapon we possibly have. They were against absolutely everything. And Reagan stood his ground and he said, sorry, take it, stuff it, and he went to go meet with Gorbachev. If he didn't, the Berlin Wall would never have fallen. And these people are just ruthless. They're filled with hatred, and there's nothing you can do to convince them. I argued with Bill Kristol, whose father started the whole neocon movement back in the 90s. And he was then saying, if we remove Saddam Hussein, Assad out of Syria, and Gaddafi, will bring peace to the Middle East. Well, all three are gone. Where's the peace? It's nothing but just total bullshit all the time. Going into Iraq, you have, General Wesley Clark after 9/11 did a speech in 2007. He said he went to the Pentagon and they said they were going into Iraq. And he said, oh, so you tied Saddam to 9/11? No. And then told him they intended to invade 7 other countries in the Middle East. All right? Look, they are no different than the Russians that they accuse, they want to expand. No, they want to expand. They expanded, NATO against all of the agreements, right up to the borders. If you just look at military history, Putin has no interest in invading Europe. Why? Because there's nothing there. They got to get their energy from Russia. They have no gold reserves. You know, the only thing that he will get is he'll walk into Paris and the French will say, "Are you going to pay our pensions?" That's it. You invade a country like Japan went into Manchuria for assets. There's got to be something there. And what they're doing is they are basically using Khrushchev. And Khrushchev was, a diehard Marxist. He really believed that communism was going to prevail and capitalism was this evil, greedy thing. And so it was a philosophical issue. It wasn't, I'm going to invade Europe to get more money or something. Or you got something I want. It was basically just a philosophical issue to destroy Russia, who is the evil capitalist empire. That was it. Nothing else. And I think I scared them because these people don't seem to remember history beyond the last 2 weeks, I think. And I explained, I said, do you realize what happened when Khrushchev had to back down in '62 from the Cuban Missile Crisis? It was a coup. Brezhnev took over. Okay, then you got the Cold War. When Gorbachev came to power, and he wasn't a communist. I mean, I issued a book that's on Amazon, The Plot to Seize Russia, and I got a hold of all the declassified documents from the Clinton administration. And right in the beginning of the book, I put the documents that show that Russia was invited to join NATO. And so their neocons acted the same as ours did. When JFK wanted peace, they took him out. So what did they do to Gorbachev? They staged the coup. They were afraid he would take that deal and Russia would surrender to NATO. So that's when Yeltsin stood on the tank in Moscow and he talked the troops down from shooting the citizens, and the coup failed. I said, if you think that you can embarrass Putin into anything, bowing to NATO, you're going to create, basically coup number 3. And this time, you're going to get somebody who's really one of their neocons. Putin's obviously not. He's laid down many red lines, and NATO has crossed every single one of them. You give long-range missiles to attack within Russia, and that's it. They do. Okay, attack us now, so we can say you're the aggressor. I spoke to Ukrainian military. They were initially told just to go to the border. And then the order came to invade the Kursk region. That came from MI6. Zelensky won't have any election because his polls are down to 23%. Ukrainians I speak to, they say if he was on fire, they wouldn't even urinate on him until he was dead. And there was an attempted assassination of him last May, or May of 24, and what happened was he fired his Ukrainian bodyguards, and his bodyguards now come from Britain and the CIA. He doesn't even trust Ukrainian people. I don't see how he can possibly even retire there. They'll kill him. So this is why he won't do an election. And to say, oh, well, no elections during war. U.S. had elections during the war. So did Britain. What's the issue here? You're the first one that says, oh, I go to war and then nobody can remove me. So I also said that we should immediately give Putin the win and agree to a tunnel between Russia and Alaska. Secondly, the Russia has rare earths. They have the technology to mine it. We do not. All right. Rare earths are not really rare. It's just that they're widely spread out. So it's not like a gold vein or something. So it takes a different type of mining operation and skills to do it. Why are rare earths even important? It takes 920 pounds of rare earths to make one F-35 jet plane. So it's an issue of national security. China has a monopoly on rare earths. To some degree, that was why Trump was talking about Canada, the 51st state, and Greenland. That was really the backdrop to some of this. And so what you're really looking at, I suggested that all sanctions against Russia should be dropped. U.S. companies should be allowed to go into Russia, do a joint venture to mine rare earths. Because Russia is also subservient to China on rare earth issues. They don't have the capital. So I suggest that we do that. It would then more or less do what Nixon and Kissinger were doing, trying to separate the two. Our neocons put the two together. So if we did that, the second benefit would be it would more or less tell the EU, hands off Russia. We're now in partnership and back off. Because the EU, they think that they can conquer Russia when get all the natural resources, the rare earths, everything else. And they really think that Europe can then rise like the Roman Empire, and rule the world again. And this is why Trump made that remark that kind of surprised everybody. But it was sarcastic. Oh, Russia's a paper tiger. Ukraine, you can keep all your land and go get some more from Russia. All right. I mean, this is absurd. Okay. What he was doing was saying exactly what the neocons are telling the EU. NATO's telling them they have 3.4 million soldiers. Russia has only 1.5. We can walk in, take Russia, matter of weeks. All right, Kinzinger said in 3 days. And Putin will fall to his knees and beg for life, beg for his life. This is all absurd. It's really delusional. And I pointed out that Kayla's had a meeting with the finance minister, or the foreign minister of China. And she was trying to talk him, basically, into telling Russia to surrender, get out of there, etc. His response, I had sources there too, so his response, I know, was, we are not prepared to allow Russia to lose because we know we would be next, which is very true. So the other thing I warned them about is that putting Russia and China together. I've studied military tactics and history. If I'm on the other side of the table, what would I do? I would invade Taiwan. North Korea attacks the south and Japan. Iran attacks in the Middle East. And Russia goes after NATO. What are you going to do now? Napoleon lost because he had too many fronts. You have 4 fronts. You're 3.4 million. Very nice. All right. Now you're not just facing Russia. You're facing China and everybody else. And in that case, you're dwarfed. So I don't know. Some of these people, I think they just hate Russia, and they focus on that only. And it's like Tony Blair on YouTube, he did his apology for going into Iraq. And he said, we thought we were freeing them from Saddam. We didn't realize we were subjecting them to sectarian violence. And this is my argument with the neocons. They do not think beyond the end of their nose. I just have to, win this. Then what? There's never any long-term planning, anything else. This is why they've lost every single war, from Korea on. The only way they got Korea to stop was Eisenhower had to threaten to nuke North Korea. We'll do to you what we just did to Hiroshima. All right, then they came to the table. That was it. The downside to that was that the U.S. was the only one with a nuke at that time. That set off the arms race. Why? Because essentially, if you didn't have a nuke, you had no seat at the table. You were dictated to. So all of a sudden, China needs them. Russia needs them. North Korea needs them. Everybody needs a nuke, otherwise it's not an even playing field. That's what the press doesn't want to talk about, so much. But you got to look at this, from an objective perspective. And the only way to ever get peace is you got to put the other guy's hat on and look at it through his eyes.
The sponsor of today's episode is ARC Silver Gold Osmium. Owner Ian Everard is praised even by his competitors as one of the most honest and level-headed bullion dealers in the United States. They have some great prices. You can see some of them displayed right now on screen. Take advantage of these specials today by reaching out to Ian at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. Make sure to tell him, of course, that Commodity Culture sent you. And now, back to the interview. Well, let's talk about peace, because you also have a section in the report which is a blueprint for peace. And I want to read a quote here. It says, "The days of Marxism that created the Cold War are over. It is time to embrace Roman free trade." So talk to us about that. How can the operation of the Roman Empire and Roman free trade, what does that teach us about potentially creating lasting peace in our modern era?
Well, they lasted for 1,000 years. Why? Because free trade, they had the Roman legendary road system, etc. So if you were in France, you could make vases and sell them to somebody in Jerusalem or Syria or whatever. Free trade was beneficial because economically everybody made money from it. Okay, so as long as there was economic connections with Russia, all right, they were not about to break them off, because the average person is going to stand up and say, "Hey, what are you doing? You do this, and I'm out of business." All right. So when you see, some companies complaining about Trump and his tariff stuff, we have to look at this, that if everybody's economically benefiting, you do not get war. Just correlate it. We've got every war going back in the ancient times in the computer. And it's very simple. You do not see war when there is prosperity. And I say, when everybody's fat and happy, they don't go to war. Let the economic situation turn negative, then people go to war. All right, so, this is, you had, a big financial panic in 1912 and 1907. 07 was more or less the culmination and the end of the railroad era. And you got into debt crises and things of this nature, and you end up with World War I. After that, we get a big boom into 1929, goes down, you get a Great Depression. What happens? World War II. All right. Roosevelt created his employment, the WPA and all that. It didn't work. All right. He needed war in order to restore jobs and get everybody back. And there were even Senate investigations on that. He kept trying to get the U.S. to join World War II, and Congress wouldn't issue a declaration of war. So there was a Senate investigation after the war on him because he deliberately created Pearl Harbor. He put all kinds of sanctions, froze all Japanese money in the United States, cut off all their energy, and then when they were trying to get energy from somebody else, he said, we're going to blockade that so you can't get anything. All right? The Senate investigation came about because then it was leaked that the U.S. had broken the Japanese code. They knew about Pearl Harbor. I put on my site, I think it was the Honolulu Tribune, which came out and said we're going to be attacked on the weekend. They had the news. Made the front pages of the newspaper. Oh, we were attacked. We didn't know. I mean, that's how we got the U.S. into World War II. This is fundamental to war. This is why NATO has crossed every line. They've done everything to try to provoke Putin to attack. Because you need an enemy to attack you. Then you get to do, it's a psychological tactic. It's called rally around the flag. You can look it up. If you say, come on, we want to go invade Russia because we don't like Putin, people aren't going to sign up for that. All right? You have to be attacked. This is what false flags are all about. Hitler used that, burnt the Reichstag, and blamed it on a communist. All right? And the bulk of the people in the Russian government at that time were Jewish. So it turned into this Jewish conspiracy. That communism was a Jewish thing. And that's why they attacked all the Jews and everything else, Kristallnacht and go on. But so you always need that external enemy. And what this report does, I explain them that the EU is your problem, not Russia. Why? As you know, I was called in when they were creating the euro. And I said, look, we got to consolidate the debt, or the euro is never going to compete with the dollar. And Helmut Kohl was the Chancellor of Germany at the time. And before he died, he said that he would have, if he let the German people vote, he would have lost 7-3. So he took Germany into the euro unilaterally. And he insisted on no consolidation of the debt because the German people would view it as bailing out Greece and Italy, etc. And I warned them. I said, look, this is not going to create a stable currency. and it's going to have a real problem long term with the debt issue. And 98, I was told, look, we understand, but we just have to create the euro first. Then we'll worry about the debt later. And here's the problem why Europe is pushing for war. They never consolidated the debt. So as a fund manager, I can pick up the phone and say, buy me $20 billion worth of U.S. treasuries. No problem. Europe, I have to make the same decision as if the euro didn't exist. Do I want Germany? Do I want France? Do I want Italy? Nothing really changed that way. A single currency didn't, solve the problem. So the real crisis here is that it's prone to a contagion. When Greece went down in 2010, what did the traders do? Oh, who's next? Oh, Spain. Okay. France, the finance minister admitted that they may need an IMF bailout. So did the UK. So the problem we have here is that if France goes down, I'm a trader. I'm not an academic. What do? First thing you're going to do is look at all the banks. Who has the most French debt? And short that bank. All right, so you're looking undermining the banking system. Then you're going to do, the pension funds are the same way. Pension funds, 70% on average, have to have government debt. So their choice is pension system collapses, banking system collapses, people are going to pick up their pitchforks and be storming the parliaments. Option A. Option B, it's Putin's fault. When Biden put the sanctions on Russia and gasoline prices went up, what did he say? It's Putin's inflation, not his. So this is why they have to constantly say, Putin wants to take all of Ukraine, and then he's going to move into Europe. For what? If he wanted Ukraine, he could have taken it right away. Like I said, we have staff in Kiev, and the first few days his tanks were right up to Kiev. And I was concerned for them. I said, look, maybe I can send you a private plane, get you out of there. And they said, no, it's not an issue. I said, what's the problem? What's going on? They're not doing anything. It's just a show of force. You had a long column of tanks just sitting there. They didn't attack. All right, it was just to show he could. And then he withdrew them. So all this propaganda, oh, Russia's weak because he hasn't been able to take Ukraine. He never wanted the whole thing. All he was there for was to protect the Donbass. When Zelensky took office, the death toll was 130,000 for Ukraine. It's now 1.8 million. He still doesn't care. He just, is lining his pockets and takes his orders from NATO. And Boris Johnson is probably the worst of all. He hops on a plane, goes over there, and that's even made the front page of the Ukrainian press, that he instructed Zelensky he was not allowed to sign a peace deal. They want this war. He made the front pages of the Norwegian press. You can Google that. He openly said the UK is in a proxy war with Russia. It's, all these countries there, I mean, the pound's falling apart. They're really living on the edge. They need war to save their government. That's what they have in their mind. we have to create war, then that rallies everybody around the flag, and the EU will survive. Our computer says the EU will not survive. All right? I do not see it surviving much beyond 2030. And as far as this war is concerned, this nonsense that it won't turn nuclear because Putin knows that it will blow back on him. I mean, if you're coming into my house, not to rob me, but to kill me, because that's what this is. This is the destruction of Russia, not to just simply get them out of Ukraine. All right. You come into my house with that intent, I'm shooting back. I mean, this isn't, like I said, in that meeting, China told Kalis, we know we would be next. They know this is a war against Russia. So, if you're really interested in peace, the Roman model is the one from history that shows us it worked. Human nature is, as long as everybody's benefiting, you do not get war. But Europe is starting to implode. I see it most likely going into a deeper recession into 2028. This is the time they need war, because they're not going to survive.
And so you've laid out some very interesting points over the course of this conversation on both, how we've got here as well as a path towards potential peace. I'm wondering what you think of the latest developments when it comes to how the U.S. is treating the conflict, because we've seen a number of events happen. The U.S. and Russia held that conference in Alaska where Trump met Putin. They made a whole show of it. There was fighter jets flying overhead. It was going to be the beginning of peace. Well, that didn't really seem to work out. Then, for some bizarre reason, Trump flew European leaders to the U.S. to sit in the White House and talk about peace without Russia. It was just totally bizarre. They're all sitting in that room, Maloney, Macron, Mertz, all of them, and talking about, well, how are we going to make peace? I mean, it was such a dog and pony show. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. Trump said, well, I called Putin, during the meeting, and we had a good conversation. This seems to be going nowhere. And now the latest development seems to be, well, now potentially the U.S. is going to be providing Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, which must be operated by U.S. personnel, and then they're going to be also potentially assisting them with targeting infrastructure and other targets within Russia. Trump and Putin supposed to have a meeting. Now that's off the table. I just want to read a quote here about it says, this is from Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov. I'm sure I'm butchering his name, but he said, any summit meeting requires in-depth preparation and careful consideration of all aspects. As of today, neither the first nor the second condition for organizing this meeting has been met. So it looks like that meeting is now off the table. Where do things stand right now? It seems that there's not really much of a path forward besides this conflict to play out on the battlefield.
It's hard to say. What I was called into, and I was asked to use my back channels. It's a parallel course off the radar. And like I said, I asked, is this sanctioned? And I was told yes. So I don't want to give anybody any false hopes here. But at least what I was called into is a parallel path. I'm trying. I was surprised to have been called in, honestly, because they know where I stand. And I have been invited to a cocktail party on the 14th. So it's still ongoing. I am have been emphasizing on the Tomahawk issue that this is, again, the neocons out of the Pentagon, because Trump said, no, we don't really have a supply. They came out on October 31st. No, we got plenty of them. The problem with the Tomahawk, and in my opinion, the Pentagon and the neocons know this, is that a Tomahawk is not simply conventional. It can also carry a nuke. Now, I'm Putin. You've just fired a Tomahawk to Moscow. Do I assume it's just conventional? Or should I have to protect my people and assume it's nuclear? There's no way to tell when that thing takes off what it's carrying, since it can carry both. Look, these neocons have to know what I know. I mean, I've been told that my back channels are as good as the CIA's, if sometimes better, maybe. I don't know. So I was asked to use them. But all I can say is that they have to know what I know. I can't believe they are that stupid. You give these Tomahawks, I'm Putin. Quite frankly, I would have to consider even nuking Kiev. And I think that's what they want. Zelensky certainly doesn't care about Ukrainian people. I mean, what are you fighting for? You're fighting for territory that's already occupied by Russians to begin with. You've outlawed their language, outlawed their religion, and you've engaged in ethnic cleansing in Odessa. In 2014, the first thing you did was start killing all the Russians. Why should this guy win? What would he do to the Donbass? And then the press is all going to say, oh, it's okay, kill as many as you want because they're just Russians. You know, torture them, set them on fire, crucify them, do whatever you want. You know? Look, this is what goes on in war. It's more civilians die than soldiers in every war. And look, Zelensky is nobody to trust. The U.S. knew when Russia was going to cross the border. He had that information. Even the Washington Post, I will at least give them credit. They interviewed him and they asked him, you knew when Russia was going to cross the border. Why didn't you inform your citizens? He actually responded and says, well, if I told them, it would have cost me $7 billion. Because money would have fled. He's a piece of shit. He is a war criminal. He doesn't care about the Ukrainian people at all. That's why his polls are down at 23%. He has no interest in ending this war. You know, all he salivates over is getting his hands on trillions of dollars. And when he was at the White House, even Trump said he hates Putin, period. Look, like I said, I've had Ukrainian people, employees. It is beyond description. They are taught that from kindergarten. Hate Russians, period. All right? And I try to even explain, do you realize, first of all, it wasn't a Russian that took all the food from Ukraine? That was Stalin. He's from Georgia. His right-hand man was Kaganovich. He's the one in charge of it. I hate to tell you, but he was born in Kiev. All right? It was Ukrainian. He was Jewish. All right? Most scholars believe that he did that to get back at the Ukrainians for killing all the Jews. It was retribution. In Moscow,